Yeah, what happens at science and theology conferences stays at science and theology conferences. So when I'm trying to tell people what I do, it depends if I want to talk to them or not. So if I don't want to talk to them, say on a train, then I say something like I'm a theologian. If I'm really excited about chatting with people, then I say I'm in science and religion. I basically say I study whatever is grim and depressing. So I'm a lecturer in science and religion, and I tend to look at things like animal suffering, how God is good in light of evolution, and cheerful things like climate change. I fell into science and religion really by accident. I was sitting at home one day not doing anyone any harm, and my father, who's a GP, came home from the office with the business card of one of his patients who happened to be a professor in science and religion at the local university in my hometown. And so I ended up meeting with him and reading his book, which was about how can we read the Bible in light of modern science? How does science affect the way we interpret the Bible, and how does it affect questions like, is the Bible true, and if so, in what way? And that's what really sparked me. I just thought, this is fascinating. I could do this for a long time, and so I have. When I'm asked what people can do with my subject, I sort of say anything you want. If you think of the topics that shape the way the world looks, you're going to have politics, economics, science, and religion. We do half of them. I think that's pretty cool. And you can really go from science and religion into anything. I think two of the really up-and-coming areas in my subject are first around climate change. We realize that it's an issue, and because so much of the world population is religious, and there have been places, particularly in North America, where I'm from, where there's been seen to be conflict between religious belief and acceptance of climate change. I think that we have a unique position to speak to that. Another thing that is up and coming is really the science of psychology and neurology as it relates to religious belief. And so one good example of that is the use of what has been called spiritual technologies, in essence psychedelics, and how things like mushrooms can induce and catalyze religious experience.
Interesting. So I'm sure many students will be interested in that.
Oh,
in particular.
People love volunteering for those studies.
I bet.
Well, my favorite video game of all time was Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Great, absolutely fabulous. You can ride a horse. Nothing is better than that. Other things that people might be surprised to know about me: I did a lot of martial arts for a long time, and this came out once at a science and religion conference where another guy who does sword fighting brought along his swords, and so we were fencing on the lawn during the conference. Yeah, we were teaching all the other people who attended too how to do basics of Western swordplay.
So actually what you have to expect if you go to a conference.
Yeah.
It's a discussion on climate change, it's that.
Yeah, what happens at science and theology conferences stays at science and theology conferences. I brought it's called various things, a storm glass, a ship glass, or a Fitzroy glass. And the reason I love this is because of its historical links. So although this was developed in the late 18th century, it was really studied by a guy named Admiral Fitzroy, who was the captain of Darwin's ship when he went around the world on the HMS Beagle. Captain Fitzroy at that point was doing his own research on this, which they thought would predict weather through its growth and disappearance of crystals. It turns out it really doesn't. It basically tells you if it's colder or warmer than the last time you looked at it. But it is very beautiful. And so, yes, I thought that was a nice little link that sits in my office to the history of scientific inquiry. Probably either a clergy person or a horse trainer. Climate change. That is going to top absolutely everything and set the policy for everything for the next, well, foreseeable future. Chocolate? Very windy. It's the windiest place I've ever lived. Beautiful. So a lot of my work deals with questions of suffering and how people's understanding of why God allows suffering changes how they suffer. And part of the reason I got interested in that is because my own work on why does God allow suffering really helped me be more resilient, be more understanding and compassionate towards other people's suffering. So I think that there's been a big transformation in my life that has come out of doing this difficult study. And so it's one of the reasons why I try and work on public dissemination, is to try and say this can be really be transformative of how we approach the suffering that we encounter.